Welcome, everybody, to our keynote panel on the topic of sustainability in open source. There's often a little bit of tension in open source when it comes to how we actually fund things and make things long-lived. I certainly, as a developer, come from a place where I'm maybe a little bit allergic to commercialization, but I think we need that in order to keep all of these awesome projects going. And so that's what we're going to dig into a little bit, is like how that tension plays out and what we can do to make healthy open source projects. And with that, I would love to give our speakers each about 30 seconds to introduce yourselves. And since you're in the top left, we'll start with you, Avi.
All right. Hello, everyone. Thanks for having me. My name is Avi Press. I'm the founder and CEO of Scarf, and we're a company that focuses on open source usage metrics. And everything that we're building and working on there is really coming from my experience as an open source maintainer, and once being in the position of trying to make this decision of, should I quit my job and work on open source full time? How do I make that decision? Once I do that, what am I doing? How am I building a business around my open source? And that's what we are very, very focused on today.
Awesome. Peculiar?
Yeah, hi everybody. My name is Peculiar, as you may. I'm an open source advocate and project manager for CHAOSS Education Project. I'm also a community builder, and when I look at my CV, I see my journey and all my experience has been in open source ever since I started. So I cannot build a career in open source and still building. And so that is me.
Awesome. And Anastasiia?
I'm Anastasiia Zvenigorodskaia. I started my open source journey at 17 with Linux community. Maybe that's why I still don't have kids. And I spent more than 13 years in front-end development and project management. And I always work for companies who has own open source products. And now I'm co-founder and chief operating officer at EpicMax, where we build to support commercial and open source projects with Vue.js, with open source too. And we are creators of Vue.UI. It's open source Vue 3 UI library. And my special interest, it's a big question, how to make open source profitable and sustainable. So I'm super happy to be here. Thank you for having me.
Cool. Thanks so much. Yeah, we're happy to have you all here. Okay, so to kick things off, Peculiar and Avi, you both kind of come from metrics-focused organizations, sort of focused on the measurements. So can we dig into those a little bit more? Peculiar, do you want to tell us about the CHAOSS project a little more in depth and what you're doing?
Sure. CHAOSS is simply means community health analytic in open source software. It is a Linux Foundation project, and we focus on developing metrics to help people measure their open source project and community health. And we have two softwares, Augur and DemoLab, you can use for this to measure or to collect these metrics and then be able to measure. And we also went a step further to when we consider those without analytic background, and then we developed and still developing practitioner guide to help anyone without analytic skill to understand and boost the sustainability of their open source, and also driving contributors' growth and transform their project health through real-world actionable metrics. That is to say, you have this data gathered from the project you're working on and from your community, and those contributing from the project, you're able to make decisions that can help your project have a long-term sustainability. And also, so basically, we spend most of our time at CHAOSS thinking about how to define components of open source project and community health, how to track and measure those components, and how to collect data to track and measure them. And also not just to collect the data, and how to interpret the collected data, and we also not just interpret them, we also look into around and get some folks involved from different contexts and perspectives to broaden us and their understanding about all the metrics we've analyze and that are out there. So these are the major things we do at CHAOSS and others. Thank you.
Awesome. And Avi, I know we've spoken a little bit about your path to founding SCARF. So I'm sure that spoke to you a little bit. Can you tell us a little about what SCARF is and what you do?
Yeah. So I think the best way to think about SCARF when it comes to open source usage metrics compared to what CHAOSS is doing is that we're very focused on how the software is actually being used. So it's much less about the code repositories. It's much less about the contribution. It's more about who is using this code, these artifacts, these containers, et cetera. And so this is done in a combination of different ways of collecting the data, the most novel of which is that we have what's called SCARF Gateway, a package and container registry gateway, which sits in between the user and the package and container registry. And as that traffic flows through for people saying pip install or Docker pull this thing, we can then analyze the traffic, enrich it, and then put it alongside of other things like telemetry or tracking pixels and documentation, or even getting data out of the package registries themselves. So at scale, SCARF is monitoring over 2 billion open source downloads every single day. And what we do with that is then watch how different companies adopt different open source, how they go from just kind of, maybe just looking at it or just maybe prototyping with it all the way down to they're in production with it or they're a paying customer. And so our platform helps take all of that usage information, put it into a tool, enrich it, and then generate insights so that, whether you are a sales, whether you're doing sales or DevRel or marketing type activities, you're actually using the real information of who's using the open source rather than proxies of that people historically have been working with.
Awesome. Would you agree? Would it be accurate to say that sort of SCARF is measuring where to put investment, and maybe CHAOSS is helping to measure the efficacy of that investment in terms of growing communities and contributors?
So I would say that is a lower order application of this data, I would say. So, our general focus here is much less on things like contribution and much more on are people actually using the software and what goes to that. So I think when it comes to things like efficacy, I think we're really looking at this in terms of does this drive more users of the project and does this drive more customers to the business that is commercializing the project? Whereas things like, where should we be putting resources and these kinds of things, I think is one application of this kind of data. But typically for our users and customers, the main thing that they're wanting to understand is, I have no idea who uses this project, and I want to know all the companies that are using it so I can do something with that, right? So I can try to upsell them, or so I can understand, where the users are we growing or shrinking and make decisions based on that. But as far as a lot of open source businesses are concerned, contribution unto itself is not necessarily useful. It may or may not be, but you can make a lot of money and not necessarily bring in tons of contributors to the project. And so we're more focused on the usage side.
Okay, great. And anything you wanted to add to that in terms of how these different metrics frameworks interplay?
So for us, it's just helping others see what they're not seeing, right? Helping them, pointing them out to directions or things they need to measure to help them, ensure they have a healthy project or healthy community to get that is open for everybody to come in and contribute to the project. So it does more of our focus. It's not actually we are tracking or we are following up each project to make sure or to find out how they're implementing it. No, we're not what we're doing is just we develop them, right? We keep them for you to make you apply it in your own context. So that's how it is on our end.
Okay, great. All right, I want to bring Anastasiia in now. So Anastasiia, you are at a company that is successfully both building on top of open source and contributing and providing open source libraries. So what benefits do you as a company and you as an owner get from that participation in the open source ecosystem?
Yeah, our company was founded by idea that we can build something like open source to showcase in our services. And for now, I can say it gave us potential for build reputation and trust with clients. But like only after, I think, 6 years, we started doing something like content marketing, public speaking, organizing own meetups. And when we started, we have this like great brand and visibility in ecosystem. Because yes, we built some project, but we wasn't silent, and it's not working. And it helped us attract clients in the end. And we built not only company around open source idea, but our, I can say, sales process, because our ideal client and buyer persona is a technical lead who loves open source and like geek stuff the same with us. And it's easy because we can speak the same language. We like small agency, we don't have some like professional sales managers, and we can't maybe offer our services for enterprise company, but maybe for small products who really value open source idea, we can be a great match, but we understood it only like maybe 2 years ago. And other big benefit is we can hire, I can say, the best in our field, because developers who love this idea of open source, some of our developers, they have own open source like hobby projects or some games or something like that. And it's really help us to understand and test people before we can hire them. We have own open source like sandbox for technical interview, for like testing new developers and understand if it's like great level of technical skills. And I believe it's a good idea, but maybe should start it with strong strategy that maybe we can build something bigger in 8 years.
In 8 years, yeah. So that's a long journey. Do you have any like highlights or lowlights that you want to share?
I can share with you how much money we spent for only one our product, and I believe it's around €500,000 only for one. 2 others cheaper, but you can imagine it's a lot of money without direct income. Yeah.
Yeah, I can't see that being funded through like Patreon.
Yeah. We can, I don't know, invest it in marketing and maybe build something like, I don't know, 10,000 people company for now, but it's a great experience, I believe.
Okay, amazing. You also mentioned, so you're able to attract the best developers because your products are open source. That's really interesting. I want to dig into that a little bit more. If anyone has thoughts on this, feel free to jump in. But like, why do we think that developers love open source? Like, what are some of the reasons that you came to open source, and why? What do we think that these contributors are actually getting out of it, that they're so passionate about it?
It's like my personal opinion. Developers who has this intention to contribute to open source products, it's not because we just like want to be part of something, but because we want to improve something, that we can see something work, maybe not the way I want, so I can build my own product, or I can offer my help. And I think it's some mindset that we really want to have in our company, that if you find some problem, you need to speak about it and try to resolve it. Maybe ask your colleagues, and not being in silent, not just jump, like it's not my problem, it's not my part of project, it's not my feature. And I believe open source vibe help people to learn more and always be more motivated and don't have this burnout. You know, we all have this problem. It's this age of AI, everything, social media, and this lack of focus. I believe if we continue learning, we can be more focused and more, I don't know, happy, I can say. And I can see in long term people who have this additional interest, not working only for money. Because like if you're a developer, you have maybe not a bad salary, depending like maybe more than average. But what's next? When you cover everything that you want, maybe you need to find some big idea, more hobby or something. And I believe open source can be this thing.
Is it a privilege to be able to contribute to open source?
I don't know. It's like not privilege. I don't like this idea of privilege. Maybe it's like community. You can play with your friends on weekends with some musical instrument, or you can open source. Like it's something like we can build some relationship with other people with the same interest. And I visited many open source events like in person, and it's always so simple to start conversation. Like we all know each other for years. I don't know what is it. Maybe.
Yeah, no. This is why the Apache conference, right, is called Community Over Code, because the community is such an important aspect. I think clearly they think that through the name of their conference. Killer, it looks like you have some thoughts. Is there anything you want to add on this topic?
Okay, so for me, open source was my learning part, right? When I was starting out new, sometimes you're confused and then you're just like learning. And then I could remember that mentor saying, okay, to upskill or to learn faster, you have to work on real life experience, not just because I started as an Android developer, then you just keep writing code and then sometimes a lot of things. And when I had that, I took that as an opportunity for me to join open source community, an open source project and learn. Mine was just to learn. That was what brought me into open source. And I learned because I was opportunity to meet global mentors that are there to guide me, to help me learn and upskill. And things I wouldn't have learned on my own while I was learning, joining open source community and then looking at the code base and trying to contribute to that code base. First, it made me to go back and read a lot of things because I was trying to understand that big code base so I can be able to contribute. So it was just about learning to upskill and then to make sure that I'm good at what I'm doing. And again, for me, it's also like learning to collaborate because I have managed a project where I was trying to teach a contributor how to collaborate in a project because collaboration is a skill, whether you like it or not. If you don't have that skill, you won't be able to work in an open source community because everybody has different view and different idea and different things to contribute as skills. So you being able to accommodate everybody's input is very, very important. And that's a skill you need to learn. So for me, it's just about you learning top skill. Then I learned and I stayed and I earned. So for me, it wasn't like they were coming to work on something and be paid. No, it wasn't that. It was just to learn. And see what happened along the line. I learned, I stayed, and I earned. So that's how it was for me. So there are a lot of benefit I've seen contributing to open source and working on open source project brings to you. If you can learn, stay, then you will earn. So that's it for me. Thank you.
Avi, anything to add to that?
I mean, I could add a very contrary opinion here, which is that I think a lot of these things don't necessarily have all that much to do with open source in particular. Like we could say, you could go up to like a BSL license project and get all these same things out of it, right? Yet I think a lot of people here would say, well, that's not really open source, right? So what's the difference? And I think one of the real I think one of the real values here is that anyone can do whatever they want with this software. And that means that everyone has real skin in the game to make it better, right? And everyone has real skin in the game to learn it and improve it and actually contribute back to the community to make the software better for everyone. And if we are, where am I going with this. Like if the thing that we value is really the just the fact that there's a community there and there's people to learn from and people to have shared interests and have fun with, there's a lot of other kinds of things where you can do that. But open source, I think, is very unique in that everyone's on the same playing field. Everyone can use the software and build a business on it, for instance, and directly compete with one another and still collaborate. And that's, I think, a very important thing here. And this is why sometimes I think that, I'm like always harping on the commercial aspects related to open source. And sometimes, like even you opened this conversation with Josh of like, oh, I'm a little allergic to commercializing this stuff. And what I would actually claim here is that's actually the really one thing that is kind of the distilled thing that actually is making open source different here. You can, there are tech meetups around completely proprietary software. You can go to like Dreamforce or Snowflake's, conference or any of these things and get all of these same things out of it. But what is really, really unique and different about open source is that it's actually creating shared incentives for why we should go spend our time and like literally contribute free labor to this thing that, another company might profit off of, right? And that I think is unique to open source in a thing that I think is very, very special and very interesting. And I think, one of the reasons that a lot of us are dedicating our lives to it in the way that we are.
Okay, great. Thank you. Thank you for adding that perspective. Yeah, it is important to keep in mind this commercialization for sure. With that in mind, actually, that's a great segue into the next topic that I wanted to talk about, which is what do these look like? What do these projects look like when they're healthy, both from a commercialization point of view, for you, Avi, and then particularly I'd ask you to chime in on like what does the metrics of a healthy contribution community look like? So what are the most important things to measure? What are the hallmarks of a healthy project in your opinion?
In my opinion, a healthy open source project goes beyond just keeping code alive. It goes beyond that. It compasses contributors' sustainability. Very important, because having active contributor to maintain and involve the project is very important. It also encompass your community health. Having a welcoming community or a welcoming, let's say, team, inclusive and responsive environment to encourage participation also can bring in a retention of all these contributors in your open source project. And again, having organizational support is also one of the things that create a healthy project or open source project. Involvement from the company or institution that can provide resources to contributors, can also provide funds or infrastructures that will help these contributors being able to contribute freely and happy. This also show a healthy open source project.
Avi, I wanted to ask you on the commercial side. What does that look like? Or rather, on the commercialization side, we should say.
Yeah, sure. So in terms of some of the top metrics that I think are important to look at on the commercialization side for open source. So, one is obviously growth in users, right? There's I think growth in downloads is one of those things that I think a lot of people look at. But what's actually more important to look at is things like a growth of the number of unique users of the project. So how many people actually, or how many people ran this application, or how many people downloaded this package or engaged with your content, or these kinds of things. Beyond that, too, is then the growth of the number of companies that are actually using the software. And this one is really important, right? Because if you are going to build a business, this is the ecosystem. This is your serviceable addressable market is the one that are actually using the open source or have some kind of awareness of it. We also will look at things like the adoption, the version upgrade patterns as well. So like, for instance, there's some like really old software out there that people use every day, but no one really is like thinking about it or even maybe aware that they're using it. And then you'll have very, very low upgrade patterns. And so like, what's the health of grep or these kinds of tools that like no one thinks about or no one's paying for these kinds of things. And like, however we define open source sustainability, I think we could argue about that for many, many hours. But I think as far as a business is concerned, is that you need companies or people getting value out of the software and the ability to provide more value to them outside of the software. And so growth in that size of your user base, I think, is probably the single most important thing. And then depending on what your business is, you might want to look at things like, okay, what's the growth in Fortune 500 users or, users in a vertical that we care about, or these kinds of things. And then the last thing that I'll add as well is that we also look very closely at things like churn rates at different stages of open source adoption. So, given that someone read your README, what's the likelihood that they then go to download your Docker container or your NPM package or these kinds of things? And that conversion rate is very, very important and fundamentally what your job is to optimize, right? And so, whether it's upgrading to new versions of the software or conversion rates as they move down the funnel, you really want to look at those metrics, and that's effectively what your whether it's DevRel or product or sales or marketing, like that funnel is what your job is to optimize. And so, putting software, open source software usage and commercialization in terms of like a more traditional sales funnel, I think is a very good framework to look at this because that is fundamentally what you're trying to do.
Okay, great. Anastasiia, I want to quickly ask you, and I'll just give you just a minute because then I want to ask one final question of everyone before we wrap up. But did any of that resonate with you? And what have you been doing at Epic Max to sort of maintain the health of your projects and your community?
Yeah, I like this point of Avi that it maybe look more like regular sales process sometimes. And I believe it's what all open source projects should have, like some customer journey map. We need to understand how our user or contributor, we need to have different processes, how they will use our product. And it's a big mistake of many developers that we are trying to build product and we assume that people use the same as we use it, but no, never. And what else? I believe we should care about documentation and beautifully pack our product. I saw many great projects that I can't find any contact email of core team. It's like I can't understand what is it for. And if we build technical tool for developers, we should have something like examples, UI stuff. Yes, we should have it. And good first issue for many projects that I saw, it's not good.
Okay.
Awesome. I feel stupid when I read this description, it's wrong. It's not healthy. We need to create this easy, beautiful way to onboard new people. Then we can have more community, more contributors. But I saw that I think it's a big problem that we create these issues depending on our level of technical skills, but it's not for maybe for junior developers. If
there's no ramp. Yeah, there's no.
Yeah, it's it's not good first issue.
Okay. All right, we have we're right at time, but I just want to ask everyone real quickly. Give me your 15-second answer. What do you think is the biggest opportunity or challenge in open source businesses for the next 5 years?
I can answer in one question: security. We have a lot of, I don't know where you all, a lot of regulation, and maybe you heard about some European regulation in security and about open source that we need to update all new version. Maybe we can have some problem, and maybe it's a big question for businesses. If we use open source for now, we need to care about it. And it's logical, but yes, for now we need to care about it. And second, maybe that we should educate businesses that they should pay for open source, not only use it, not only expect that people fix everything for free.
Great answer. You couldn't agree more.
Yeah. And I see on my side, I'm seeing where contributors are not just like some years back, you just coming in to learn. I'm seeing in the future where contributors are not just only coming in to learn, because a lot of people are learning a lot these days. And there are so many things outside there to help you learn. And in those years to come, and seeing where contributors have been like waiting that your open source could be a paid one for them to be able to come into, sustain that such an open source project. Yeah.
Cool. Yeah. I would say probably the biggest challenge for the next 5 years is going to be basically like adapting to the new world of enterprise software with AI right now, where like I think a lot of the traditional approaches to commercializing open source have been largely around like SaaS. And I think a lot of approaches with SaaS are currently starting to break down as the general cost model with providing these services is now very different when AI needs to be a big part of that product or that service, that offering, et cetera. And so I would say like both from a, how do you position your project when the technical landscape is shifting very quickly and when like the VC market is changing very quickly and just buying behaviors and what people want is changing very quickly. I would say that this is a time where like being a little bit ahead of the ball is very important, but it's never been harder to do that.
Yeah. Fun. Okay. Well, thank you all so much. That's all the time we have. And thank you all again to our panelists. This has been fantastic.